Oh, hello, dear friends. I'm Holly Elissa, Holly Elissa Bruno, coming to you from actually Fitchburg in central Massachusetts. If you're coming worldwide, that's near Boston. Yeah. And just so glad to be with you. Today is perhaps the 8th of January, 2024. Wow. And I first want to check in. How are you doing? How are you doing? We made it through the holidays. We're still here. Maybe we don't have everybody with us, but we're still here. We went through what 12-step people, people in mostly addiction recovery, mostly addiction to substances like alcohol, drugs, food, etc. But there's some of us who do 12-step recovery for the soul, and that is addictions to things like perfection or addictions to um, sadness, addiction to sadness. There's even a book about that. It's called ATM, Addicted to Misery, ATM. So, what I'm saying here is people who are trauma survivors self medicate. We try to heal, we try to uplift ourselves. We do everything under the sun and under the moon to heal. And today, and also, I just want to acknowledge you and we've all just gotten through a major event. And I was starting to say that people who are in addiction recovery for substances often call and this is particularly American, but we can go deeper with it to make it more applicable to everybody. They call the season from November through January 1st the trifecta. And even if I don't know what trifecta means, I know that tri means three. And so there are three events that happen, and they've happened forever. One is the harvest, sukkot. Many cultures have celebrations about the harvest. And what happens? People get together when they eat. What do? They drink. Yeah. Or if they're trauma survivors and they're not self-medicating with substance, they self-medicate with trying to we self-medicate with trying to people please or trying to be like the perfect people that our families want us to be, which of course I can't be. And then we end up feeling the deep, hollow sadness of not belonging. And Matthew Lieberman, the neuroscientist whom I read, who says our most basic need is not to eat food. Most basic need is to belong, is to feel like we're loved, to feel like we have a group that cares about us. Is that true for you? It's been true for me, and that's driven me for much of my life. And when you look at my collectivist culture, collectivist versus individualistic, they come from Sicilian culture, which is, I believe, in my experience, collectivist. You're part of this tribe, part of this familia, and you support, and a good Sicilian daughter supports the family no matter what. Puts the family first, puts the family males first. Oh my goodness, that is the way. And so as I talk about the trifecta and how it's very hard for trauma survivors because it brings up the dregs of the trauma that we had since childhood. And I'm thinking of an image of that. I was in Turks and Caicos in the Caribbean. It was a beautiful place, but I got robbed there, which was a very unpleasant, sad thing. It just is always sad to be violated, right? But they had a kind of dog there that I really liked. The average dog on the street, the stray, you know what they call those dogs? Ready for this? What would you call a stray dog in a tropical island? I'm thinking, what was his name? Who was the guy that did Margaritaville that we lost recently? Jimmy Buffett. So call them Jimmys, all right? Or Buffies. But instead, the name of these dogs in Turks and Caicos, the island in the Caribbean, was pot stickers. So when we think of the image of the trifecta, that these three seasonal big changes that we go through, that they stir up the bottom of the pot, pot stickers are seen as in Turks and Caicos as what's left. It's the dregs. It's what you have to scrub out and you can't get out. But you know what? Think if you're a chef, a cook, a connoisseur, if you love food, think of when you have browned something in a pot. And then instead of scraping it out, you pour in liquid, maybe stock. And from that stock, what's stuck to the bottom, the pot sticker's flavor comes up, it rises up. And guess what? That makes the whole dish better. And honestly, that's a nice little gift for trauma survivors on the holidays. Why? Because we got stuck to the pot. We didn't have a choice. We were told we were less than nothing, and only our perfect selves, which was always impossible, was acceptable. And if we weren't our perfect selves, then we didn't exist. So many of us became parentified adults, and you know that means that we children become the adults' caregivers. So I keep saying, I knew this from birth, that I was my mother's caregiver. My mother had mental illness and she often wasn't present. She dissociated from her body. She split off from who she was. That's how she survived, having been a beautiful child who was raised by an alcoholic and a pedophile father and a mother who was possibly narcissistic, just not present. And so my mother learned to survive. Didn't have food. They didn't have food. They used to take, I went to a family reunion and one of my cousins, Leslie, very sensitively brought a can of condensed milk. And she had boiled it down. And she had a tiny spoon, tiny spoons. And she gave each one of us a tiny spoon of this very sweet. It wasn't a liquid anymore. It was almost caramelized, right? And caramelized is what you call when you bring the pot stickings up to the top. You take the caramelized stuff, which is turned to sugar. Naturally, the sugars come out of it, and you raise it up. And so here was my cousin Leslie, and she passed this around, and we tasted it, and it was a very sweet taste. And she asked us, "What's that like?" And I said, "Well, it's too sweet. It's wonderful, but it's too sweet for me." And she said, "This was the way our parents were raised. They didn't have enough food. They didn't have anything extra. They had to share everything. They were lucky to have heat. My grandfather, who was an alcoholic, took off and left these 8 children with a mother to take care of themselves. As soon as the girls got anywhere near appearing old enough, they went to work. They had to drop out of school. My mother did that. My aunts did that. Dropped out of school. The boys, because this was a gender preferred society, this Scottish German society, the boys got sent to college. However, they had to go to Bible school, which they did so that they could have a profession as, oh dear, see, one cousin became a missionary. Another cousin, my Uncle Arthur, my Uncle Charles Briggs worked for Billy Graham, traveled around the world setting things up for Billy Graham. So what I got when Leslie served us that sweetness, that sweet taste, this was all perhaps my mother got to taste of the sweetness of life. No wonder she became a food addict. That one taste was all she got. That one taste was all she got. Did you ever feel that yourself? That as a trauma survivor, you just got one taste? I wrote in my book, Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, and I read about it last time we were together. I wrote about the one time I remember my father smiling at me. And I had a counselor say to me way back, decades ago, last century, she said to me 2 things that were very powerful. She said, we trauma survivors always remember almost in a clutching way, those few times when we were given, or it appeared we were given what we needed. My father smiling at me. A smile conveys so much. He didn't smile at me, but he was building our house from the earth up. And I was so impressed. It was like alchemy. I'm a little 3-year-old kid. I don't know the word alchemy. But what I do know is that to build something out of nothing, to dig a hole in the earth and have an edifice rise up. Wow. I just got back from India where I was equally startled. And this has something to do with our theme about beauty today. What's your relationship with beauty? Why does beauty matter to you? If it does, and if so, why so much? In India, in southern India, I witnessed these edifices, these structures, these holy temples and meeting places where the sculptor, the architect, from the top down, you probably heard me say this. I'm trying to understand what it's like to be on the top of a mound, a boulder, a large boulder. I mean, it doesn't even look discrete like a boulder. It's like part of a mountain that you're on. And for the architect to see, if I chisel here and I chisel there, and then I chisel here, and then I chisel away the other, I can create a temple that will last forever, or as long as human beings can remember. And I saw those temples. Not only did I see them, but I read about them in Covenant of Water by Dr. Abraham Verghese, or Verghese, as I say. It's a powerful book. It's a powerful book. And I went to one of the places, I went to many of the places that he writes about. And one of those places has these edifices, temples mostly. They're not huge, but they're big enough to walk in, many of them. And they have carvings, stone carvings, and it's all one piece of rock. And I feel, I've not got to research this more, but I feel the architectural genius that did this said, if I can construct this of one rock, this will last forever. This is the rock. Didn't that get said in Christian scripture about Peter? The stone that the builders rejected will become the cornerstone. But there's more to it than that. It's like the stone is the rock. And I grew up in Sunday schools where we used to sing, Jesus loves the little children. But the other thing we sang was, rains came down and the suns came up. Rains came down, floods came up, rains came down and the floods came up. Those rains came down and the floods came up, and the house on the rock stood firm. Foolish man built his house upon the sand. Well, guess what? In southern India, the architects, the stone sculptors, they built on the shore the Sea of Bengal, the Sea of Bengal. And when the tsunamis came and washed the sands all around, or when the sand stayed washed all around and covered up those structures, those temples, those temples never disappeared. And if you read, I was going to say Cutting for Stone, because that's the other Verghese book that I love. But if you read Covenant of Water, you'll see that the most beautiful place, one of the women, Celeste, could take Digby, the naive, well-intended, trauma-surviving, they're both trauma-surviving, doctor. She wanted to show him the beauty of the land, the beauty of the people, and she took him down the beach to see these 5 edifices, which were at that time in the early 1912, around there. She took them to see him, to see those structures emerging from the sand. And why am I saying all this? Oh, it's a good question. I want to pull some strings together. The topic here is, what is it about beauty that saves the soul of a trauma survivor. I've talked with so many of you that tell me when I ask, what's your connection with beautiful things? What's your connection with beauty? And there's almost a, oh. So tell me what's beautiful to you. And often people say, well, children's faces, yeah. Crazy hair, yeah. Often they say, I just go in the woods. I just go walking in the woods and I just notice everything that's around. I take my dog for a walk. I go to the beach and I walk beside the water. He leadeth me beside the still water to restore my soul. It's no accident that all of these religious and scriptural messages carry a lot of the same information. The water heals our soul. The beauty heals our soul. The song of the wind through the leaves in the trees heals our soul. So there's my question, my friends. Do you have a special relationship with beauty? How does that manifest for you? How do you feel that? How do you see that? I mean, it affects me every day. I've decided on this topic. Why? I mean, I'm sitting here with my kitchen behind me and cathedral ceilings above me. My office is up there. And yeah, that's a chicken. I was in India and I didn't think I had to get my calendars for the year. So when I went to get a calendar, I said, oh, I need one. I picked the best from the local supermarket and it was about glamour chicken. So there's my glamour chicken. I didn't know about chicken, so I picked it up. Anyway, relationship with beauty. In this book, I write that being a trauma survivor gives me an opportunity, a choice for the most meaningful of lives, including a fierce dedication to make the world better, if you only in a tiny way, for children, including my fierce, sustaining relationship with beauty. Why do I do my hair this color? Why do I let it grow so cray-cray naturally? Because it's natural beauty. Why do I care about earrings? I'm just going to answer that. She's just cute. No, yeah, it'll stop. I'm not going to answer it because I don't. Okay. That said, spam unknown. I'm glad I checked it. So if the theme is, does beauty matter to you and does it restore your soul? And as a trauma survivor, does it give you comfort? Does it give you comfort, for example, when there was no one to put his safe, loving arms around you and you turned to the moon, as I did? When there was no one to tell you you're beautiful and you turned, as I did, to the stars and to the, the moonlight shining through the pine trees, the scent of apple blossoms. One time, as a very, very abandoned child, I wrote about this in the book. I said every year I would walk past Marjorie Sage's farm. And Marjorie Sage's farm had a stand. They were so much taller than I was, of lilacs, mostly purple lilacs, some really deep, great purple lilacs, and then some white ones. They all had a different scent. And I would walk home from school and I would gently take the boughs of the lilacs and I would just put them around and up in my face so that I could breathe them in. And the words that came from my soul, from my heart, were, if I die in this moment, this will be enough. Psychologists could probably have a good time with that, but that's demeaning it. The truth is, I said the truth. Children, little children who are traumatized, know the truth. They know that they have a deep longing for something eternal. had a deep longing for something eternal, something that would matter, something that would stay with me, something that I could count on. So that didn't happen for me. That didn't happen for me. I had behaviors that I could count on. I learned this. I learned to have a sense of humor. I learned that laughing helped me feel better. I learned that being outdoors, getting the breezes, being free of the confines of a madhouse, which I'm sorry to say it was, that healed me. Those are just two things, but I yearned in my heart for a love that was more than just love. That's Edgar Allan Poe. We loved with a love that was more than just love. I and my Annabelle Lee. So the yearning, that's a word that I lived with for decades. I had a yearning to find, and I was looking outside myself most of the time, the love, the security, the happiness, the joy that I had buried in my soul, but I didn't know that was my answer. It's always been there. I kept looking for love in all the wrong places. Relationships with narcissists. I could cure one narcissist. I could cure the relationship I had with my father. I did not know what a narcissist was. So let's go back to where we're coming from today. We're just coming out of this trifecta of the holidays. And if you're not American, I'm really glad you're here, as I'm glad for the people from Florida and Biloxi and Seattle and Tulsa and everywhere. Oh, dears. Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Look, people have celebrated the changing of the seasons and the meaning behind that. And we've celebrated that forever, even before we wrote about it. So there's always a harvest festival, right? We are thankful to whatever powers God's God that makes it possible for us to have food to get through the harder times. We're grateful for that. That's beautiful. So everybody's got harvest festivals. And the Jewish folk call that Sukkot, Sukkat, and they build like a temple out of plants, like out of, they put leaves on, it's like a hut. And it's a gratitude thing. It's a gratitude edifice for the harvest. And then the light goes down until there's almost nothing left. And souls get depressed, especially traumatized people that have been robbed of much of the light. We get depressed. And so there's a celebration. The next one is the celebration of the coming of the light, when the universe tweaks just a little, just enough that the days which have been really confined and dark begin to let in the light. That's the second celebration. And the third celebration is the saying goodbye to the old and looking to the new. In Judaism, that's done, the Days of Atonement are done in the fall. They're quite powerful times to look at ourselves and ask, who am I? What have I done? For what do I need to atone? What do I need to make amends for? How can I live a life that's truer, more of service? But for many people, that change of the year, the New Year's Eve, that celebration of time coming to a close and now time beginning again. It's a new year. It's like the goddess Janus, after whom January was named. And Janus looked back at what was, but she also turned her head and looked to what was ahead. And so we've just come through this trifecta. It's called a trifecta by people addicted to substances because it's a time when there's so much buried sadness that takes our hearts and so much pain of what we don't have and so much reminder of trauma that we don't want to face. I'll speak for myself. So much reminder of loss and the horrible aching feeling that a child has when she doesn't have enough to eat, that's magnified when a child doesn't have love. Children are nurtured on love. We don't have it as trauma survivors. That's either a deficit for the rest of our lives that we self-medicate for, or it's a quest for the rest of our lives to find where the joy is inside of us rather than seeking it outside of us. So that was the trifecta, and many people self-medicated. I did. I self-medicated with a very safe addiction. I was going to say people pleaser, but it didn't always matter that people saw what I was doing. What mattered more was that in my heart, I knew I was bringing joy to somebody. I loved doing that. We had a practice later on in the year where I grew up in the countryside of New York State, Corning, New York. We had a practice of making May baskets, taking flowers, which were abundant everywhere, probably from people's yards, but there were a lot of flowers that were just abundant, like apple blossoms, daffodils that bloomed on the side of the road, tiger lilies, all that kind of thing. And so we would make, and I'd make them in school. I'd make these colored paper baskets. And then I'd pick these flowers and I would run from door to door in my neighborhood, placing a basket of fresh, redolent, sweet smelling, sweetness of life smelling flowers, lilacs, daisies. No, I don't think there were daisies yet. Daffodils, apple blossoms, violets on people's front door handle. And then I'd ring the bell and then I'd run so no one could see me. Did you ever do that? May basket. And I loved it. I would run around the side of the house and I was small enough I couldn't be seen. So I would wait to hear if the person got the flowers and if the person said anything. And often there was a housewife, of course, getting the flowers. And she said, "Oh, or how sweet." Or there was just a silence without anger in it. And I needed silences without anger. So all of this, my friends, raises the question, why? And whys are not so helpful as is coming from the heart. I feel beauty is one of my saving graces in life. Do you feel that? Do you feel if you can get into a beautiful place, gosh, you can breathe again? There are times I've been in big cities and I was terrified of being lost in a big city. I felt like I was back in the confines of my home where no one saw me and where there were dangers everywhere. If I were seen, I could be beaten. If I were seen, the belt could come out with a buckle. By the way, one reminder, if anything I say triggers you, there's a way to replace a trigger with a glimmer. A glimmer is a reminder of hope. It's not to stop the feeling that I may have of the sadness that goes along with being, and panic that goes along with being a trauma survivor. But I have a choice. In every moment, I might not be ready or able to deal with the trauma. And so if I need to, I suppose I could call it self-medicating, but it just feels more like self-care because it's not destructive. If I need to have a glimmer of hope, then I get a glimmer of hope by coming face to face, heart to heart with beauty. So I am inspired today because I'm looking out my window and icicles, kind of timeless icicles. I mean, they leave, right? But while they're there, they're their own structures and the light shines through them and they're like rainbow miracles. And then the snow has recreated the entire woods behind me. The entire woods behind me with its pines and its maples and its oaks. All of these, and its mountain laurel, all of these behind me are different now. There are like big cotton ball puffs. There are stripes of white. There are mounds where there used to be rocks. I want to say that when I was in a city and I got terrified because I felt like no one, I don't exist. I don't exist. And and that took me back to when I was beaten to a pulp, beaten into blacking out, and I was gone. I didn't know if I was alive or dead. And so sometimes in a city when I didn't know anybody, and I do this a lot, I go to cities a lot alone and speak, and I meet people, and I'm okay. However, early on, I wasn't okay. And so I'd be in a place like New York City or even Boston, and I'd start to feel that panic coming up, closing up my throat. I'd start to feel my heart wanting to beat its way, the palpitations beat out of my chest. My mind, flatline. The executive function was gone. I was just pushed by the amygdala to get to a safe place. So I'd look out the window and I'd see that a block away was a park, pocket park, just a little one. But I knew that as soon as I could, I would go out and almost literally hug a tree. I would go out and sit beneath the tree until I felt at home inside myself. So beauty, I believe, and I want to hear from you. And I, you know what? I haven't yet got it down. Let me see. I could see if you're making comments. I'm scared to do this. I might lose this program. So let me do enough on the program so that there's substance to it. And then I'm going to try this at the end. If you've been trying to say something, like I know my old friend and fellow traveler Denise is with me, and I really want to hear what she's got to say. She has, like a number of you, each one of you being unique to me. Denise has inspired programs by asking questions, by making comments. Ryan and all the other people, Nick, all the other people that have been with us from the start have inspired me and continue to. So here's what I want to say. Do you have a heartfelt, soulful connection with nature that no matter what, being in the nature that matters to you soothes your soul and helps you feel at home? That helps you feel like, as Shakespeare said, God's in his heaven and all's right with the world. It helps you feel like nobody's going to hurt me. I'm safe here. I'm safe here. I felt safer as a child beneath the trees at night, beneath the stars at night, even with mosquitoes around. I felt safer outdoors, even with the dew landing on me. I felt safer outdoors than I ever did inside that house where abuse, incest, all of those things were possible. And now I want to remind you, if you're in the United States or even outside, look to, if you feel like trauma is coming back instead of hope, if you need a glimmer rather than a flashback, go to the website, which is Trauma Warm Lines. Trauma Warm Lines. And you'll discover that all across the United States, there's a number you can call. And all you have to do is need to talk with somebody who's understanding. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to agree to get counseling. You're talking with someone like yourself or me who's been traumatized, and I'm here to listen to you. And they're there to listen to you. So trauma warm lines are not the same as hotlines. Hotlines are when something's about to explode. Warm lines are when things are heating up. They're not explosive, but they're heating up and we need to talk with someone. So I invite you to just go there now if that's what you need, or anytime during the program. And now I want to continue with this connection with beauty and why it is so soulfully and heartfelt a need for trauma survivors, or at least for me. And what I've been doing is checking with other people. Does this matter to you? And how many trauma survivors do we know that walk in the woods every day, that go to the waterside every day, that must get to the ocean no matter when, Think of the times in your life when you needed to locate yourself in a place where there was beauty. If you work with young children, do you plant seeds with the children? They plant their own seeds and they watch them grow. Flowers by the end of the season. I mean, it is a remarkable thing to see that hope, to see those tiny glimmers come to life, just like the children themselves, just like a trauma survivor. There's always a tiny burning, and the burning goes both ways. It hurts and it enlightens. There's always a tiny burning cusp, soul, heart of us that's always there saying, don't give up, sweetie. Don't give up. And even if you give up, because it can be awful, it can be impossible, it can be deadening. Even if you give up, I won't leave you. I being, and Emerson said this, Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said, we all got these souls, these places inside of us where things don't have a time clock clicking. They're eternal. They're lasting. We all have those inside of us. And then he said there's an oversoul. I thought that was an interesting way of talking about the divine. The oversoul. The oversoul is what's in nature and all around us when people are at their kindness. The oversoul is what we're part of. And so his theory of death, and Emerson got Alzheimer's. So who knows if this helped him? I hope it did. But at the moments of death, our soul returns to what he called the oversoul. And the way to picture that is like leaves falling to the earth and they go into fertilizing the next generation. What I want to say is this, it's in the book. And by the way, if you're interested in getting the book and you don't have it, it is available on Exchange, as in back and forth, Exchange Press, which is in Lincoln, Nebraska. So if you just look up my name, Holly Elissa Bruno, or Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, Translating Trauma's Harsh Legacy into Healing, you can get the book there and just say the word happiness, mention that, and you'll get a discount. You can also go to Amazon. However, I've heard people are having trouble getting it on Amazon. And I think that there is, I think I'm sure that there's a online copy too. What you'll find in the book is, like right here, every page or so, there's something in a frame. And the frame is a loving frame. They're built on these early 20th century handmade frames that people used to do. And this one says, every time you lie, the message is every time you lie, it brings me a little closer to goodbye. What does this one say? This one says, even if, this is Rumi, even if there's a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, crowd of sorrows comes in and sweeps you empty, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. I love that. I love that because the losses that we have aren't killing. They aren't like they're killing, but they aren't killing. They are pathways into a deeper understanding of what matters to me. All of the times when I felt in a city that I didn't exist, I would find my way by connecting with people, by finding a beautiful place, by finding a piece of art. I could go to a city in an art museum and sit there watching the light change on a Monet. All those impressionists who were intimate with the light, or all of those pre-Raphaelites who began with light. I like that. The pre-Raphaelites, Dante, Gabriel, Rossetti, all those people in the 19th century who began with their palettes painting them white, so that behind whatever they painted, out would come the light. I love that image. I have still a lot of love for Raphaelite paintings. They're they glow, but not like the glow of a velvet Elvis, although it might glow for you, doesn't glow for me. But the sides of the road in southern states, United States, there are these velvet tapestry type things that you can buy, and they often have Elvis or airplanes or motorcycles or something on them. But the pre-Raphaelites were dedicated to the light, just as the Impressionists were dedicated to bringing the light back in. And Charles René Mackintosh, a Scottish author Scottish architect and artist, cleared out all of that thick Victorian heaviness. And he opened up all the places, the homes, the schools that he built to the light. I have to call you back. He opened those all up to the light and let the light in. And I went to see every one of those in Glasgow because they're so inspiring. And I have in my hallway here some of his replications of his artwork. So here's what I wanted to quote for you. It's in the book someplace, but it's Wordsworth's Ode on a Grecian Urn. I learned this over 50 years ago. It's never left me. Beauty, like poetry, like music, stays in us and becomes our mommy, our daddy, our Grammy, our Nona, the beloved uncle, the beloved aunt. Beauty is truth, and truth beauty. That's all you know on earth, and that's all you need to know. How does that come to you? Do you feel that at all? When I read that, and then I went to the British Museum where the Grecian urn is, and more to that poem is, bold lover, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. And the urn has a lover who's leaning over, like in all those, help me out here, Hallmark movies. It's always a sequence where the lovers are just about to kiss. Oh my God, they're getting so close and it looks about to kiss, and then boom, something distracts them and they don't talk about it. They just go right on as if nothing happened, like trauma survivors. Yeah. But there it is in the British Museum, the urn with a man and a woman. They're leaning, he's more leaning toward her, but they're leaning toward each other to kiss. And they never do because it's frozen. It's like the sculptures on the temples in India. Those are rock friezes that are frozen. They're rock sculptures. They're rock faces on the temple. They tell stories because people didn't read. So we needed to have the stories told. Just like in early church, we needed to have people tell us parables over and over again if we didn't read. And just like in the caves in, is it Périgord? Not Périgord, some places near Bordeaux, Dordogne in France, are these cave paintings that reminded people of what the ancestors did, because we feel. A man named Lifton, I read him in the 60s when the 50s and 60s when the terror of the nuclear bomb was such a threat. And he said, we people have an innate desire for eternity. He also talked about immorality. So he said, how do we gain immorality? Well, to the everyday person, many of us, we raise children. We birth, we adopt, we raise children. And the children who have then loved, not unloved, but loved lives. There it is. The gift of a trauma survivor is to give the love to others, especially children who can take it in and not always reject it. Little children are pretty defended too. But when they trust us and they rest in us, with the love. They carry that forever. So one of the ways to remain immortal was to pass down through generations. The other way was to write, or to create art, or to create something that would last. And we all know those things don't really last long either, but there I was in southern India where these structures are still there and they're still stunning. They're still beautiful. So those are the two ways to have immortality. And yet many people seek somehow to remain immortal. You know, I had a partner once who wanted to have his brain frozen, cyrogenetics, so that when the day came that science was at a point where people could be brought back, just like plants from eons ago that were frozen in the earth, their DNA can be treated in such a way that the plant can grow again. So he wanted his brain to come back. And it was fascinating that he wanted the brain, not the heart. You know, in England, when, who was it? Thomas Hardy died. It's a kind of a gourd practice that put your boundaries up. It's also kind of touching. The part of the body that people wanted to place in their mausoleums or place in their sacred places was the heart. So Thomas Hardy died in his beloved Dorset. God, his heart is in London. Is it Westminster Cathedral? It's in London. So, my friends, my question for you is this. What is it? What in beauty soothes your soul, touches your heart, helps you feel like God's in God's heaven and all's right in the world? And if you're not a person, if you're an atheist, that's fine. Helps you feel like life has meaning. Life has more to it than torture and suffering. There's more to life than grin and bear it. I used to like to ask people, if your family had an unspoken motto, what would it be? I said that to my family, to my sisters. They were puzzled. They were thinking, I'm sure they're both introverts. And I said, for me, grin and bear it. That's it. And getting all these messages. Let me say goodbye to that one. And when I said, grin and bear it, don't ask for much, they nodded. That was the message we got. Grin and bear it. So what was the message your family gave you as a trauma survivor? I mean, my oldest sister, who's been dead now for sadly quite a while, she said to me one time, well, my father told me, and that would be the same father that I had. She said, my father told me I could be anything I wanted to be. Now, in the family history that I've been able to discover, there are messages from my father to my sisters. You have your marching orders. I don't care if you've got a PhD. I don't care if you've got a JD. I don't care if you've got an MD. I don't care what you got. PhD, because both my sisters have those. Doesn't matter. I don't care. You got your marching orders. Your job is ready for this. Give me grandchildren. Now that's the talk of a narcissist. Give them to me. I need to have grandchildren. It's not about you. It's not about your life. It's not about what's meaningful for you. It's give me. So my friends, the gift, and it feels spiritual to me. Spiritual is something that feels timeless. And I ask, is anything timeless? You know, and I've gone around with that one a lot. But there's some things that endure, and beauty endures. Beauty endures. These flowers that I've planted now for decades in all different parts of America and in England. Did I plant them there? Maybe. But more so here in America where I've had homes, or temporary homes. I always plant perennials so that there are flowers. There's a place in Sterling, Massachusetts that has, oh my God, it's like a secret garden, except it blooms for everybody. I just kept planting and replanting and separating bulbs and tubers and spreading them so that this whole place is a beautiful summer home of garden. I hope it's still happening. When I left there and I left my partner, we separated because our relationship wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't true. It wasn't soulful anymore. And yet, for both of us. And yet, when I left all those flowers. And for years, the flowers were untended, but they poke their heads up anyway. And I hope they still will. I will drive by again. Just he's gone, my partner, but I'll drive by. So, my friends, the other thing that inspired this program is that in the early childhood field, there are conferences that happen every year. And so I sent in a proposal that I get to speak about genius. And my request is that we redefine genius. That's this static thing that works for white men and very few others about IQ points. Measuring genius, that's, get over it. If Red Rogers have genius, yeah. How about Mother Teresa? Yeah. How about Georgia O'Keeffe? Yeah. How about a baby that sees something? I was just watching a video, maybe you saw it, a little guy who had just learned how to give 2 thumbs up. He was all excited and he stopped himself and was looking at his hands and really concentrating. He's looking at these 2 fingers and someplace inside of him was saying no. And then he looked at his thumbs and he went like this, and his grin was like everywhere. Beauty, the beauty of a child's face, the beauty of a dog looking adoringly. What is your source of beauty? And how does it soothe your soul like Mother Earth? Or how does it soothe your soul like the parent you never had? And now, how do you partner with that? As my friend Denise partners with monarch butterflies. She has managed to help so many of those monarch butterflies fly, not get lost, not get chewed up, but to fly. I mean, it's really quite beautiful. So let's end with this, my friends. I'll see you, I hope, every Monday, 3 p.m. East Coast time, US, 8 p.m. if you're in London, 10 and a half hours ahead. My goodness, that's a whole different time in Madras, Chennai, or Kochi, or Pondicherry, or Colombo, Sri Lanka, or Beijing, or Salvador, Brazil, wherever you are. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being open with me to reflect upon what gives us joy and what gives us healing as trauma survivors. Because we can and we are translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. Just look at these dragonflies, and there's the message. Look at the drawings, and there's the message. And look at the colors, and the light. Love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And if you join afterwards, send me your comments. I really want to hear. So I'll say fare thee well. Love you. And Denise, miss you, girl. I'll figure out. Let me see if I can do it. I promised I would. More is live on Facebook. Yeah, that didn't do it. That didn't do it. Oh, no. I hope I'm still with you. I think I am. I pray I am. I am. Oh, God, wait. I'm now ending the recording. Tried to sign on to see if you guys were in the chat and I could connect with you. However, here we go. I guess I'm live streaming on Facebook. So, guys, this will now be in its entirety available to you. Just watch my Facebook page or watch my iTunes page or whatever. So here I'm going to stop the recording and send this. Thank you. Love you. Beauty is truth. Here's beauty. That's all you know on earth and all you need to know. Let's find out.